to be doing to function in this class. So the thing I found interesting is generally the students who had lower grades were very confident they knew the material, even though they were not doing so well. But a lot of that they said was, yeah, I know I'm not doing the assignments all the way. So they were kind of partially doing things and felt pretty good, but it was kind of a little bit of a wake-up call. So I did some additional surveys where they had to say what their preference was for classes in general, right? And so what I found was that between the beginning to the end of the semester, they actually changed their preference to more strongly agree that every student would know the other members by the class. At the beginning of the semester, it was kind of like, it doesn't really matter whether or not we know other students. By the end, it was like, no, I want to know them. I'm working with them individually every day. And same thing about how long it took to get to know everybody. They wanted to know people faster by the end of the semester. When I looked at what they preferred versus how they actually perceived my class, they would rather work more at their own pace than what my class was. You know, bear in mind, I've got those, we're doing this time to this time. And they'd rather have more of a say in how classes run, and they would wish they liked coming to class a little bit more. So those are areas where I think I can kind of make some improvements and think about how I can present these differently. The other thing is by doing both quantitative and qualitative, you start to get some other ideas. So I identified that persistence error where, oh, they're just not even answering this. I also got some information about course delivery, right? I promise my explanations did not improve that much in 3 semesters. And then, of course, the perceived versus actual content problem. So there's a lot of things that you can get out of these. So I'll be happy to take questions. I did want to share with you a few of my favorite interview responses, so I'll leave those up there for you to read. But those were comments from the students regarding the class. So. Yeah. Any questions I can answer right now? Yeah.
I know you said this course is on a 3-semester rotation.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk about how long it took you to actually design the course? Because this has to take a lot of forethought ahead of time, and this is obviously not a course that's done every semester. So how long did it take you to actually design the course?
Yeah, so I already had those terminology concept questions and lectures and things from having, and of course we all know time-wise how long it can take to make lectures and things, where it was, so getting at your question of how long did it actually take to flip the class, utilizing what I already had, it was the bulk of my summer, I'm not gonna lie. I met with Gray, I think initially in May, and we talked about, okay, what are my overall course objectives? Okay, and then he said, well, now you need to think about how you're going to break those down, and so I went back and split things out. But bear in mind, okay, so I made the crazy decision to do this all at once and flip it over in one semester. It can be broken into pieces, right? So one semester you might just say, okay, this topic's really, really important. What are some activities I can do in class to help get at that topic? And maybe it's not fully flipped, but you can do it in pieces. And so keep that in mind. Don't feel like, oh my gosh, I don't have a summer or a semester to try and do this. You can absolutely take those little tidbits and just kind of keep adding a little bit every semester. So, good. Other questions?
Your anonymous evaluation, is that paper?
Yeah.
Are you handing out paper, or are you using like an app or that?
Yeah, so the question was the anonymous learning survey, how am I doing that? Right now I've been using paper, honestly, just a half sheet, and they have to fill it out before they can leave the classroom that day. So it ensures that they do that. So, yeah. But certainly you could use an app if you wanted to.
Since this is a 400 senior level class, do you get a sense it's easier to flip an upper level class because those students are vested in that discipline than perhaps a lower or wider for your students in your college?
Yes and no. On the one hand, they're more vested. On the other hand, they've had 4 years of classes that are not like this, and so it's a big change where sometimes if you do it at the introductory level, they don't have an impression of what classes should be like as much as those senior students do. So it's really whichever level you do it at, it's really a matter of continuously reminding them, this is why we're doing the class this way, this is how it works, and this is why it's so important to be doing those outside assignments. And then making sure that you do, something's got to be for a grade for that outside stuff, or some way to encourage them to do it. So.
You take attendance figure into their grade?
So does attendance figure into their grade? No. I actually don't do any attendance for their grade, but there are some of those in-class assignments that are for a grade, and they don't know before class whether or not there's going to be an in-class assignment that's for a grade. So that's where the attendance comes into play, is that they know they might miss something that's going to be graded. So, good. Other questions?
I was wondering, I'm sorry.
It's fine, go ahead.
Do you get any pushback with having an assignment due within 24 to 48 hours?
Yeah, so
And how have you managed that?
So thinking about, have I gotten pushback making an assignment due the next day? A little bit. So there's two things I've done to management. One is I make sure it is either like 1-2 problems that, I think they should be able to do in 15 minutes. The reality is it's probably going to take them closer to 45 minutes or an hour in some cases. The other thing is I tell them, the reason we're doing this is so that you can review what you did in class. If you wait too long, you're going to forget. And the other thing is I tell them, it's due so that I can grade it and immediately have it back to you by next class, which they do like that a lot, that they get that immediate feedback. The other thing is I just try and continuously remind them, like, you can work with each other outside of class, right? Find a few minutes where you can figure this out together. Don't feel like you have to do it on your own. And I think that encourages that sharing in class a little bit more as well. So, yeah.
Related to Clint's question about attendance, how do you handle maybe like a student if they're absent and it's excused, but they missed the class period when it was an activity for a break?
Yeah, so thinking about what do you do if a student misses a class period for an excused reason and loses that grade. What I actually do at the end of the semester, I do everything on points, and so I basically calculate their points out of 90% for that section of their grade so that they know there's some leeway. You can miss up to 10%. I realize things happen. Maybe you just had a bad day, lost your, got in a car wreck or, sick or whatever. So that accounts for that. But it also lets me avoid having to grade things later, because the whole point is I want to be able to immediately get those things back by the next class, so I can't wait for that. But it does give them the opportunity to not have that impact their grade. So, yeah.
How do you group students? So do you group them so they're volunteer to be in the same group, or you group them?
Yeah, so the question was, how do I group the students? Initially, the first day, what I do is the very first activity, I say, work with whoever you want, right? And then the next activity, I say, you need to work with somebody you didn't work with for the last one. And I just force them to keep kind of moving around. Sometimes I'll pair them up and say, find somebody whose birthday's in the same month as yours or a different month or something. And so I don't necessarily force them to work together, but I do make them move around the room a little bit. And in some instances, you'll get a student who just, doesn't want to leave their seat, and I'll just be like, oh, hey, so-and-so in the back doesn't have a partner. Why don't you go back there and work with them? And sometimes they roll their eyes, but they generally will get up and move when I say something like that. So.